What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and, well, it's that time of year again, and we are officially here. This is my personal top 40 albums of 2024. This year has been, again, absolutely awesome, much like the year before, and honestly, I would say, 2022 was pretty damn good, too. Honestly, I can't think of, a really flat-out bad year that metal has had here recently, just because there's been such an awesome influx of new artists and old artists coming out with quality stuff. And once again, I think my list kind of reflects that with, a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces too. So we're going to get this kicked off with part one here. This will be 40 through 26, and we are kicking off with a band that would be new to this list, with Obscene and their album Agony and Wounds. I've been a fan of this band since their debut. I absolutely love their style of just flat out old school death metal with lots of influences from, I would say, Cannibal Corpse, Asphyx, and even some Bolt Thrower too. A lot of their influences are very old school, but they combine them in a really cool way. And I think on this album, this might be their strongest offering yet. Tons of vicious chugging riffs throughout this entire album, but also a lot of just cold, kind of ghoulish atmosphere. And that is capped off by the awesome vocal performance in here by Kyle Shaw, who his vocals flat out sound horrifying at times. He has found this sweet spot between Martin Van Drunen and John Tardy, where it just sounds absolutely hellish at times. And it gives the band overall just a more haunting, more sinister sound. And that was the thing that I really liked about this. It's not just, flat out old school death metal across the board. There's a lot of nuance to it. Again, colder, darker atmosphere that almost feels more at place with black metal, but done in a death metal fashion. If you have never checked out this band, I would recommend starting here and then just go ahead and check out their other two albums because they're both awesome as well. But yeah, number 40, killer stuff. At number 39, we have Witch Vomit with Funeral Sanctum. This was definitely among one of my most anticipated albums this year. I was a big fan of their last EP, but for me, Buried Deep in a Bottomless Grave, I absolutely love that album. That was one of my favorite albums of 2019. So I was eagerly awaiting another full length from this band, and this band delivered once again. Though this one is a little bit different than Buried Deep in a Bottomless Grave, there's a little bit more black metal atmosphere at times, but the riffs are still punishing. They're very intricate. I absolutely love the vocals on here. This guy has just such a great delivery. But that addition of some black metal textures to some of the songs, more of a seasoning. I wouldn't call this black and death metal, but there's just enough black metal on here to really kind of give it a colder, nastier sound. It kind of reminds me of Dissection, but it's Dissection combined with Autopsy. I had the pleasure of getting this band off my bucket list for bands I really wanted to see live this year, and they absolutely slayed in their performance. It was pretty much perfect. They played almost everything I wanted to hear, even though I probably would have liked to have heard more off of Buried Deep in a Bottomless Grave, because I absolutely adore that album. But when you get a new album, you got to promote it live. And every song on here I really dig, even some of the interludes. They kind of open up that kind of cold, frosty atmosphere. But baseline, this is all about the riff work, and the riff work absolutely kills across the board in this album. If you're big into bands like Incantation, Drawn and Quartered, but also Autopsy and stuff like that, check out this band. Check out this album. Check out any of their albums. Honestly, all of them are really good. But yeah, number 39, Witch Vomit, absolutely killer album. At number 38, we have Tzompantli, Beating the Drums of Ancestral Force. I was a huge fan of their debut album, where I believe it was just a two-man project at that point. This slow, lumbering, atmospheric death doom with their Mesoamerican themes, I thought that was an awesome combination, even though I couldn't pronounce any of the song titles. Believe me, that theme is once again on point here. But this album really expanded their sound overall. Whereas I would say the first one is kind of comparable more to a band like Fluids, it's more about the groove, it's more about those lumbering, droning riffs. This added a whole bunch of dynamics, as well as 9 other members. There's way more in the way of vocal dynamics on here, gang vocals and chants. There's extra percussion, and even their bass line sound kind of changed a bit on here, whereas Death Doom is still very prevalent on here. There's more moments of speedier material, blast beats. The opening track in here, which I cannot pronounce, there's blast beats and almost Nile-like songwriting tropes in there in terms of atmosphere and melodies. They even included those creepy Aztec death whistles, which are particularly haunting on here. I like the fact that they kept all their themes intact and they managed to grow their sound a little bit more beyond the very straightforward, just lumbering attack of the first album. This album shows a lot of growth in their sound, and honestly, it gets me excited for future endeavors just because I kind of want to see what else they do now. Well, with the first one, I would say, like, if you're just a big fan of Death Doom, like, that album is definitely the ticket. This one, it's a little bit more complex, I guess you could say. While Death Doom is still very much a part of this, there's a lot more in the way of like intricate riff work, again, like extra percussion. There's stuff on here that's very similar to like Morbid Angel, maybe even some Gate Creeper like grooves to it. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but I recommend checking out this album. This is a really immersive, awesome listen, and I don't know if it's like a step up from the last one, but it's notably different and it's also quality. So yeah, check out Tzompantli. This band is amazing. And number 37, and continuing this streak of 20 buck spin records, because once again, 20 buck spin just had a killer year, we have Fulci with Duckface Killings. I love Fulci. I love everything that they have put out so far, and I was absolutely stoked for this one when it dropped, even though this is yet another Fulci movie that I'm not familiar with, just like the last one. And unfortunately, I still haven't watched this one, so I don't get all the references, but it doesn't really matter because this is just flat out pummeling old school death metal with hints of brutal death metal to kind of give it like some extra heft on the breakdowns. I think this band probably loves Cannibal Corpse just about as much as they love Fulci flicks. And the Fulci flick for this one, apparently I need to watch New York Ripper because just the thought of a guy killing prostitutes while making Donald Duck noises over the phone to the cops is quite the premise. When it comes to Fulci, I mostly stick to like Gates of Hell and, you know, The Beyond. They're probably the most well-known ones, but this band's just campy embrace of all things gory and grimy and specifically Italian. I absolutely love it. Well, I'm not the biggest fan of the track with the rapper on it. I believe it was Knife. I like everything else on here. That song, while, you know, I know they wanted to like take a chance and have some fun with it, it just doesn't quite fit. And even within that song, it kind of resets itself to like a more groovy, more just kind of like doomy song in general. And it kind of just moves on like it never happened. And I mean, honestly, it was cool with that. Like, just get back to the stuff that they do well. Groove, riffs. I like the fact that they use a real drummer on here. That was a first for them. This is just a flat out fun death metal album. And yeah, I dig it if you're a big fan of pretty much everything that Fulci has put out, but also just like, again, old school, riffy, heavy death metal. Cannibal Corpse, Malevolent Creation, Obituary, stuff like that. Check this album out. Awesome stuff. At number 36, we have My Dying Bride, A Mortal Binding. I really enjoyed their last album, though it was way more on the melodic side and was just, I mean, drenched in misery. And I know that that album in particular has a very deep personal meaning, especially to Aaron, because of his daughter and what she was going through at the time. But I kind of longed for an album that kind of brought me back to, well, why I got into this band, and this album definitely did it. This is dreary, heavy, melancholic as hell. This album can sonically squeeze the happiness out of any room that it's played in. And that is exactly what I want from My Dying Bride because they're pretty much the masters of it. Whether it's Aaron's woeful vocals or his massive growls or Andrew's amazing riff work and that extra somber violin on top of everything, this album is just designed to just bring in the gray clouds and the misery, and I absolutely love it. Now, strangely enough, as this list goes on, you're probably going to see some bands that definitely take cues from this band in terms of influences that arguably I think did it maybe a little bit better, but this was still an absolutely awesome album. If you're a longtime My Dying Bride fan, then you'll probably dig this, and well, much like me, you're probably worried about at least the future of the band right now because of certain things that have been happening. Either way, My Dying Bride, I think, put out an absolutely killer album this year. Number 36 for me. Check it out. Number 35. This one might be maybe a tad divisive. I don't know. I saw a lot of love for it. I saw a lot of hate for it. I saw a lot of middle ground for it. But for me, I absolutely loved it, and that is Deicide Banished by Sin. This, I still think, is the strongest Deicide album since Stench of Redemption, and yeah, with Deicide's career, there is, you know, some definite low points for damn sure. And then honestly, after the first three albums, the high points, I feel, are a little bit scattered. But this album I would count as a high point. In fact, the only thing I don't like about this album is the shitty AI cover. But that's whatever. The music on here, I think, is awesome. It is exactly what Deicide does. But I would even say it kind of adds maybe a little bit of melody to their sound now. New guitarist Taylor Norberg, I think, adds a little bit of a flash of melody in here, especially in the lead work. But This is just flat out what I want from Deicide. Thrashy, menacing, fast-paced. Glenn still sounds amazing on vocals, his alternating high screams and those low roars. And yeah, the lyrical shtick is the same as it ever was. Glenn doesn't like Jesus. And while when I was younger, I thought the lyrics were really cool. I was like, yeah, I'm never going to church. And I didn't. But now, yeah, they kind of seem a little bit campy, but I've never been like the biggest lyric person when it came down to death metal. I just want some riffs and energy, and this album brings that on pretty much every track. Faithless in particular is one of my favorite songs. The title track, Trinity of None. The opening track from Unknown Heights, You Shall Fall. This album is just packed with like legit bangers. Again, I know this one was kind of divisive, even with some longtime Deicide fans. They were like, it's pretty mid, or yeah, this is terrible. Some people didn't like the production. I don't know. To me, this reaffirmed my faith in Deicide, which is a weird sentence to say because Glenn's like not big on faith. But yeah, this is an absolute banger, number 35 on my list. Check it out. Good stuff, Deicide. Number 34, Replicant, Infinite Mortality. I was a big fan of their first album, but I think that they improved on this album. This band's style of dissonant, but very technical, very like just razor sharp, precise death metal, I think is like fully fleshed out on this one. This album is packed full of complex riff structures and dissonant accents and crazy chugging angular riffs and just amazing syncopation across the board, but it also is really good at atmosphere. The very dry Martin Van Drunen-esque vocals on here add a very like harrowing dimension to their sound. Despite it sounding very precise and pinpoint and accurate, it also sounds just haunting and mechanical too. This is something I don't know if I would call modern death metal or technical death metal or even dissonant death metal. It's almost sort of a blend of all of those things. It doesn't do any of those things too much to really call it one of them. It's very much a blend of it, and yeah, they absolutely nailed it on here. If you have never heard this band, well, they're from New Jersey. They're awesome. This album's amazing, and of course, if you like this one, go ahead and check out their last one too, because it's also awesome. But yeah, Replicant, good job, killer album. At number 33, oddly enough, I believe this is also another New Jersey-based band. We have Trog with Horrors Beyond. This one kind of came out of nowhere for me. Well, I really liked their last EP of Vomit Reborn. I think that's the name of it. It's got a really awesomely gross album cover. Anyway, I became a huge fan of this album. Not only was the album cover ridiculously indescribable, I don't know what's going on there. Is it like a zombified Yeti and he's just melting people's faces off with his eye lasers? I don't know. It doesn't really matter because what matters is the absolutely amazing songwriting on here. This band does just flat out old school death metal, but it's kind of a blend between like Swedish death metal and US death metal. You have like the thrashier, more like straightforward Floridian stuff on here, but it is mixed with like stuff that is more akin to like Dismember, Bloodbath, Entombed. While I wouldn't call the guitar tone a full-on HM2 snarl, it's got a little bit of that bite to it, but stylistically it feels like a blend of those two styles. You have D-beat grooves and like crustier riffs, but you also have like more thrash-laden sections. The riff work on here is absolutely amazing. The last track, Ontological Shock in particular, is one of my favorites, but man, The Void, Ritual Corpse Division, pretty much every song on here absolutely rules, and they're a little bit more drawn out too, so you get a lot of room for dynamics, killer lead work, awesome vocals, awesome production. It's got a lot of old school charm. It's still technical. It's still a little bit more dynamic. Yeah, this is just great death metal. I can just pretty much sum it up with that. If you're a big fan of like Bloodbath, Suffocation, I would even throw in some Hypocrisy in there and maybe some Skeletal Remains. Check this band out. Check out their last EP too, and I think there's another EP out there. Just check out all their stuff. I haven't heard anything bad from this band yet, and yeah, this might be the best thing that they've put out so far, so yeah, check it out. At number 32, we have Kvaen, The Formless Fires. I was a huge fan of their last album. Actually, I was a big fan of their debut too. This is a one-man Swedish black metal act. I would almost say black and thrash at points, but I think this is the one that all of the black metal influence really came pouring out. Now, when a lot of people hear one-man black metal band, they'll think, okay, this is going to be some bedroom black metal where it's just some really depressed teenagers screaming in corpse paint, playing over like lo-fi riffs and a Fisher-Price drum kit. That is totally not the case here. This is refined, awesome riff work with tons of melody. The lead work on here is exceptional as hell. Tons of atmosphere, tons of great riff changes and dynamics in the songs. This guy definitely wanted to go for like a bigger sound. Like this definitely takes more pages from bands like Dissection and Emperor in terms of the songwriting being just, you know, a little bit more lavish, a little bit more intricate, but it doesn't skimp on that cold, bleak atmosphere that you look for in black metal. While I might favor the last one a little bit more than this one, this is still an absolutely killer album from start to finish. I love the thrashier elements on here in particular when this guy decides to go with like machine gun fire riffs and stampeding drums. It is just a shot in the arm of energy. But I like that this album also runs the gamut of styles. You have like the more traditional second wave stuff that comes in, more epic, you know, almost progressive song structure, folky elements. This is just quality black metal. If you're a big fan of, again, like Dissection, Emperor, in the thrashier moments, I still hear like some stuff that sounds a little similar to Skeleton Witch too, maybe a little R Noir. Check this out. Absolutely killer album from this band, and if you like this, just go ahead and get their other two albums because they're both awesome too. At number 31, we have Skeletal Remains, Fragments of the Ageless. This band continues their streak of just amazing albums. This is, again, very Floridian, just kind of morbid angel worshipping death metal, and this band does it just absolutely perfectly, I would say. Very riff driven, but also very technical. Lots of killer lead trades on here. Amazing drum work. The songs are tight, they're vicious, but they're also catchy and loaded with just amazing riffy hooks. This isn't anything that different from what the band has been doing in the past, but once again, they're doing it just exceptionally well. Probably the biggest change that I notice on here is maybe the vocals. Chris is not doing as much of the Martin Van Drunen dry howls as he did before. It's more of just a flat out roar, and honestly, it works really well. You still get moments where he has that more dry delivery that comes in, but I like it kind of as an accent point now. But in terms of them just honing their craft, once again, like this is kind of a continuation of their last album, The Entombment of Chaos, which I think is still just an absolutely amazing album. Songs like Repentless Appetite, Verminous Embodiment, Forever in Sufferance, just tremolo hook after tremolo hook, big, biting, nasty, groovy breakdowns. This album flat out rules and walks a nice line between just very retroactive death metal, but also still has a good modern touch to it. If you're a big fan of Morbid Angel, Hate Eternal, God, I mean, just like a litany of just flat out killer, like, death metal bands, period. Check this album out, and then if you like it, again, just go ahead and check out the rest of their stuff because I don't think this band has a bad album, and that streak continues once again with this one. So yeah, check it out. At number 30, we have Void Witch with their debut full-length Horripilating Presence. We actually had to look up what horripilating meant, and that is the whole sensation of fear that raises goosebumps on your body. We didn't even know that there was a word for that, but Void Witch did. And they created an album that actually kind of generates a bit of that atmosphere. This is just bludgeoning death doom with a good touch of melody. It kind of walks the line between like more swampy, murky, sinister death doom and more of the melancholic style. So you get, you know, a little bit of like My Dying Bride, but also, you know, stuff like early Hooded Menace. Absolutely crushing, slow, droning riffs, but also good spots of like more up-tempo material and good chuggy ones too. The vocals in here are awesome. If you're a big fan of Temple of Void and that more dramatic, over-the-top delivery, this will line up perfectly with it. The songs are longer, they're more drawn out, but there's a lot of cool dynamics in terms of like slow builds back into heavy sections. And again, melody, like there's a lot of that melancholic, just dark, brooding melody across this. Thousand-Eyed Stalactite and maybe this title track, or I don't know, man, Supernova of Brain and Bone. I mean, I liked every track in here, but those are definitely some big standouts on here. If you're a big fan, again, of Temple of Void, big time, like I think this band has a lot of similarities to that one. But again, also Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, Hooded Menace, especially more of their earlier material. Stuff like that. This was a killer debut from this Texas death doom band, and I'm hoping that we hear more from this band in the future. So check it out. At number 29, we have Hyperdontia, Harvest of Malevolence. I was absolutely stoked when I saw that this band was coming out with a new album because I was a huge fan of their Deranged EP, which kind of marked a bit of a change in terms of the band's sound. Mostly in production, I would say. Like, they kind of ditched the more murky, cavernous sound and kind of tightened up everything and at least dialed back the reverb somewhat and really just went for the hooks in terms of the riff work. But they didn't do it in like a corny, like melodic way. Like, they weren't trying to do like a In Flames thing, whatever the hell they're doing now. They were still doing like just quality old school 90s death metal, but with like a little bit more attention to hooks. And hearing this is essentially Deranged kind of extended out. These songs are just flat out catchy. Like right from the rip, the opening track, Death's Embrace, there's a riff that hits with this cool little like stuttered section that it just has this fun kind of catchy hook. There's tons of groove on here. The bass work on this album is absolutely fantastic and it actually shines in the mix. There are moments in here where the bass just kind of takes over and does like bass runs almost as leads while the guitars kind of drone on tremolos or just kind of do like some open chord strumming. While I would still say that this band is like very retroactive in their sound, like it's definitely very rooted in 90s death metal, it's done exceedingly well in here. And again, hearing them sort of evolve their sound ever so slightly and making it just like a little bit catchier, but not sacrificing any of the heaviness. Like you still have cavernous, ghoulish vocals. You still have bludgeoning breakdowns. You have every ingredient for killer death metal on here. It's just done with like a little bit more in the way of hooks. If you're a big fan of, God, Pestilence, Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel, a litany of just killer old school bands, check this album out. Absolutely awesome work, guys, and looking forward to more in the future too. Number 28, and this is one we reviewed really early in the year, and I've been just kind of hooked on it. And this band has been like kind of changing their sound over the years. Honestly, this band sounds nothing like the band that I initially got into, but it is 100% still the same band. And that band is Lord Dying with their new album, Clandestine Transcendence. I screwed up multiple times trying to say that album title. It doesn't really roll off the tongue that easily, but at least I didn't say Clandestine or Clandestine or whatever the fuck Shred said in that video. Anyway, this band, early on, I would have just called flat out sludge metal. Like a lot of crowbar worship, you know, some high on fire isms in there too. Solid riffs, you know, they were just blunt force trauma and just grimy and filthy. And over the course of the last couple of albums, this band has really been evolving their sound. And this one is kind of light years beyond their earlier albums. Virtually every song in here seems like it has its own identity. You have songs that have absolutely disgusting death metal elements. You have, of course, their very sludgy sound. But you also have stuff that has like a little bit more of like a rustic Appalachian vibe. You have stuff that is kind of like Twin Peaks-ish. And there's some like songs here I would call flat out prog rock at times. Dancing on the Emptiness in particular, there's just this amazing melody that goes through that and these kind of woeful croons, and it's catchier than hell. It's very infectious. There's a repeated refrain in there that I have had stuck in my head since I heard this album. At points, I feel as though this is almost comparable to Enslaved in terms of their approach, the dynamics, the dropouts, the atmosphere, and I really dig that. Like, this album is very expressive. Like, you know, it wants to do a lot of different things, and honestly, it's doing them all really well. So I really can't call this flat out sludge metal anymore. I would even go as far as to say like this is kind of getting closer to like bands like Baroness and Mastodon, where there's a lot of other elements getting incorporated in, and I feel like this band is definitely hitting like kind of that stride in terms of their music. If you're a big fan of both of those bands, as well as like there's definitely some high on fire stuff, and again, maybe like something akin to Enslaved too, check this album out. This is an amazing piece of work, and honestly, could be my favorite from this band so far, even though I really love those first two. But again, almost kind of an entirely different animal now. But yeah, check this out. Killer album. At number 27, we have 200 Stab Wounds with Manual Manic Procedures. Now, I already had a hunch I was going to like this one, and we had kind of an inside track as to the direction this band was going to go with this new album, or at least somewhat. When we did that interview at our house, which was, you know, awkward, but a lot of fun. It was great hanging out with the dudes, and we still love running into them at shows. We got to hear some scratch tracks of what they were working on, and we were a little shocked that they were kind of like changing around things ever so slightly. And it was cool to hear what we heard then turned into these more refined songs, and Well, the thing that kind of changed on here was this band brought in a lot of thrash metal influences. Whereas Slave to the Scalpel, which I fucking love that album, is more groove laden, more about like just the beatdowns and the chugs and the crazy riff changes. This one kind of settles down a little bit more and the riff changes, kind of draws out parts. But the inclusion of thrash metal on here in terms of like having some faster sections with like, you know, more like Sepultura, like Beneath the Remains style riffs, and it kind of opens up their sound a bit. Flesh from Within might be my favorite track in here just because that is like a pure throwback to like death thrash. Like there's like Demolition Hammer vibes to it, but there's still plenty of what you love about 200 Stab Wounds if you love 200 Stab Wounds. Still plenty of breakdowns, still plenty of grooves. You even get some like fun, kind of extra grimy atmosphere in here too, and still just catchy riff after catchy riff. So this band found a cool way to move their sound forward and retain what people already liked about them. And yeah, they fucking nailed it on this one. So yeah, if you're a big fan of, I mean, Sanguisugabog, I would say like Creeping Death, but also like some old school Slayer riffs every now and then, some Demolition Hammer. Check this album out. Way to go, guys. Killer album. And finally, for at least this video, we have number 26, which is Deceased, Children of the Morgue. I am a longtime Deceased fan, and I was absolutely stoked when I saw that they were coming out with a new album. King Fowley, I think, is just such an underrated frontman, and he is pretty much the conductor on this freight train of riffs and melodies and atmosphere that, I mean, is 100% Deceased. And by that I mean, I really can't think of another band that sounds just like Deceased. They are a blend of death metal, thrash metal, and traditional heavy metal, all whirled up into this, you know, horror-loving, ghoulish package packed with melody, hooks, and a lot of just killer old-school songwriting tropes that I still love. The Gravedigger might be one of my favorite riffs I think I heard this year, that lumbering, chuggy, thrashy sound. And of course King on top of that telling us his tales of woe and depravity and horror. All that absolutely works. But man, it's when the band just kind of opens up their sound, especially on the bridges, and just kind of unloads every riff they got. That is where I absolutely love them. This album is just absolutely killer start to finish. Even the interludes are pretty cool. I know King gave us a comment about us bitch about interludes. That's mostly me. I bitch about interludes. But they do kind of work as setup, even though I'm still skipping them just to get down to the awesome songs. But yeah, if you're a longtime Deceased fan, you probably already love this. I've seen this on a fair amount of year-end lists already. But if you have never heard of this band, honestly, this is not a bad place to start. And I would say you can just kind of work your way backwards through their discography and probably find a ton of albums that you really dig. So yeah, number 26 for me. Way to go, Deceased. Welcome back. And looking forward to seeing you guys next year with Corner. And that will do it for part 1. I am going to get down to doing part 2 here, and then obviously the top 10. And then after that, who knows? Well, I mean, I imagine John's going to have his list too, but yeah, we're going to kind of just get on some other projects. And since releases are going to be slow, it kind of leaves a lot of things open. So yeah, get ready for probably some retro reviews again, because we kind of miss doing those. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you were new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships now. They are only 99 cents, and we do members only streams every now and then. Looks like we're going to probably do one sometime in January. December's maybe a little too nuts for like a full-on like members only live stream. We might do like a random live stream in there just because we're bored and we want to hang out. But we want to kind of get some stuff together for like actual topics to discuss for the members only one. And baseline, this is the new way to support the channel if you'd like. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, which is linked down below in the video description, along with the list of all these releases. At some point, I'm not going to put them up immediately because, you know, I want to leave a little bit of a mystery. I'll wait like a day or two. But that is where we have our shirts and our hats. And again, if you would like to help us out and join the channel and become a member, join button right down below. And of course, thank you guys for literally everything. Another year of doing this. It has been amazing. And this channel continues to grow for whatever reason. I'm still not quite sure. It can't be our charm and grace and all that, because I'm pretty sure we don't have any of that. But we appreciate all your support nonetheless. Again, tons of content coming out in the future. And yeah, we're going to keep this goofy train rolling because it's been awesome so far. Just about as awesome as you guys have been. So one more big thank you, because you guys are in fact awesome. I said it twice now, and we will catch you later.